Hello, everybody. Welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
I always feel like a fraud when we're talking about topics that are not Fantasy Premier League because I start saying the world revolves around Fantasy Premier League. But this podcast doesn't, James. It is a people's poll. You put the vote out there. I'm bringing the energy because, as you said to me yesterday, after today, I'm not on no content, nothing for 12 days or something. So let's go out with a bang. Let's upset as many people as we can.
It's good that I'm the one who goes on holiday and you don't do anything for 12 days. It's interesting.
Well, I don't do any podcasting for 12 days. Let's be clear. I've got paper bags to sell.
I don't know if you ever properly take a holiday, mate. People's Poll podcast for you today. Yes, it's non-FPL related. There were 3 topics. The clear loser at third place of the vote was the one that Suj really wanted, which I think is something we'll come back onto on Patreon. Suj, I know you feel quite passionately about it. Security at football, Wembley, Paris Champions League final, recent incidents in the USA for the Copa America final. People keep running onto football pitches.
Right, you can't ignore Euro 2024 and selfie central, everyone wanting a photo with Ronaldo.
Exactly that. One of our patrons, Sam, said last night, he said he thought the security in Germany was pretty good. And I was like, yeah, that's great. What about all the people running on the pitch? And he was like, well, I was at the final. I didn't see any. I was like, yeah, but no one wants a photo with an England player, do they, mate? So that's why you didn't see anything. Security didn't win. We'll come back to it, though. One of the things I was keen to discuss, and it perhaps is a money in football podcast for us as well, so is the cost of Premier League football next season. To give you a kind of a headline of that, 19 of the 20 Premier League clubs have increased season ticket prices this year. Any guesses for the one that hasn't?
Bournemouth.
No, it's Crystal Palace.
Okay.
But the other 19 have increased season ticket prices.
I was very torn there, James, with picking a club that's already so expensive that could they even get away with more, or someone down at the bottom that knew that their fan base, like Bournemouth being such a small stadium, could they're not going to take the piss with their fan base type thing.
I mean,
but I'd say it's in the middle.
Some of the spiraling costs are ridiculous. I've mentioned Wolves a few times on a few bits of content very recently, like some child tickets going up like 60% and stuff. Like, wow, how? But today we are talking, and I'll headline this as England after Southgate. Clayton and I did a podcast last Tuesday when the announcement came of Gareth Southgate's departure, but we haven't actually spoken about it publicly. And it's now been a week since Gareth left, so we're going to reflect on that and then look about, what do we want as England fans for the team as a nation moving forward? And then we're going to look at this job description because we know exactly what the FA are looking for. And I think that rules a few people out of the running. Such reflection on Gareth Southgate's tenure as England manager.
Yeah, I would just very quickly before we get on to Gareth Southgate, the words you used on your tweet exactly were, what next for England? So once we reflected on Gareth Southgate, let's just look at that specifically as the question, what next for England? I think that he will be looked back on in the future in a far better light than he has been during his tenure. I think we'll look back. We always look back with rose-tinted glasses anyway, but I think in the future, because of what I feel is down the road for England, we will look back at what Gareth Southgate was able to achieve and put him in far higher regard than we did whilst he was the manager, which I think is part of the problem of the whole structure with England as a national team. I think that the culture of the attitude towards the national team, which is a combination of fans, media, clubs, and so on, is rotten and has been for a long time. And what Gareth was able to do was make sure that the team, the culture within the team, wasn't rotten. If we look back to the golden generation, we look back and say, well, the culture there was rotten. I think culture in any organization is hugely important. You set the tone from the top. You decide what you want to be, how you want to behave, how you want to be portrayed. And if you set the right culture, everything else follows. The results follow, the attitude follows, and so on. And I think if you look at the structure of English football and attitudes towards, during his tenure, the media hasn't improved in terms of culture. The clubs generally haven't. I don't think the fans' attitude towards the culture of the team hasn't improved. But
Can you elaborate on those points? When you say like the
yeah,
clubs haven't improved, like what do you mean by that?
I mean, do you you know how players used to get phantom injuries and pull out of England squads and
Okay.
what have you? I don't
You're
think the
saying
clubs
how the clubs
care whether
assist the
England do
national team.
well or not. Yeah,
Okay.
they don't care about whether England does well or don't at all. But the culture within the England team and the England setup has revolutionized. Like the animosity sometimes I feel towards national football and the England national team is never directed at the manager or the players, because I like them. I really believe there's a likable group of young players that I would happily say could be role models. They're not prima donnas. They're not flash Harrys. I mean, some of them are. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to generalize, but there's so many of them that I look at and I would be happy to be role models for. And a lot of that stems from what Gareth has tried to instill within the culture of the camp and the camaraderie and what have you. And I think that he will be looked back on in the future, what he's been able to do as a kind of role model. You know how there are certain people that changed the sport. So Clive Woodward, when he took over England, rugby at the time was an amateur sport and had just become professional, like full-time paid athletes. And then there was a journey from when he took over England to England winning the World Cup in 2003. And he now is looked at as the blueprint of how to make cultural change and structural change and professionalize organizations and set a standard. Dave Brailsford with Sky Cycling, how you put in the structure of how you build a team and the processes and systems around it to perform at an elite level. I think there is a lot that Gareth has done within that setup that will be looked back on in the future and looked at as a blueprint of how an organization should be set up structurally and run. And I love that side of things. Tactically and all that kind of stuff, there will always be differing opinions on. You will say 3 at the back, you will say 4 at the back. Oh, you should play him. Oh, you should play him. That will always be a matter of opinion, and there will always be different voices and different opinions. And the issue is always how people voice them. But what he has done from a point of view of the image of the team, what they stand for, the values, I think is second to none. I honestly, the only thing I can think of another England manager that was able to do that. And remember where we were coming from. Remember where we were coming from. Rock bottom.
Yeah, I mean, it's very well said. You went a long time there before you mentioned football results. I mean, that's quite key. But it's also worth saying, even just to touch on the results and the draws, semi-final, final, quarter-final, final, is an unheard of sustainable period of good results. Yes, not without the ultimate of winning a trophy, but it's England's most sustained period. It's not even just England's most sustained period. It's England's most sustained period by an absolute mile since
Yep.
Sir Alf Ramsey
Crazy.
and the World Cup winning squad and perhaps 68 and 1970, which then, by the way, followed a succession of tournaments that England didn't even qualify, World Cups in 74 and 1978 included. So results wise, remove what you want to watch and all that kind of thing. Results wise, yes, it would have been great to win a trophy. But again, let's also remember that when he took over, as you said, absolutely on the floor. Iceland 2016, 1 point in the group in 2014. Embarrassed without actually being beaten by Italy in 2012. The farce of 2010, losing 4-1 to Germany after an abysmal group stage when we could have lost to Germany by more than 4-1, despite the Frank Lampard ghost goal. Euro 2008, we didn't even qualify. And before that was the golden generation. And the idea that this group of players, yes, it's very talented, is the best England team since 1966. And that, yeah, how many, we've discussed this, how many of this current squad would actually get in the sort of 2004, 2006 teams? And the answer isn't actually many. So
I think there's the yeah butters, James, right? The yeah but. I think Right now, everybody is like, when we got to the final, it'll be, yeah, but we had an easy draw. Yeah, but we didn't play well. 4 years from now, or 6 years from now, 8 years from now, there's going to be a tournament. We get knocked out in the last 16 or group stage. And we're going to play great football and we're going to lose every game 4-3. And the yeah, but as this time will be, yeah, but Gareth got to the final. He didn't play good football. Like, there's always a yeah, but. And what your attitude
I've
is depends
never,
on where you are in the moment.
I've never, ever, ever known universal happiness with what England are doing. Ever,
Yeah.
ever, at any point. Whether it's someone to change the style of the team, the players selected, you've got however millions of people, 50, 60 million people, probably, let's say, I don't know, 20 to 25 million with a kind of real opinion on the England football team. You are not going to get all those opinions are the same. It is never universal 100% happiness. Had we beaten Spain last Sunday, there still would not have been 100% universal happiness. It's also okay to acknowledge what Gareth Southgate has achieved and also still sit here and say, yes, I think it was the right thing to change. But I've had people say to me, I don't understand how you can be thankful for what he's done and stuff like that. And I'm everything that you said about the off field stuff, forget tactics for a minute. Everything about how we changed the psyche of how people feel connected to the players within the football team. Everybody hated that 04 and 06 team. Everybody knew it was good, but largely disliked the majority of the individuals. And within that group of squads, the majority of the individuals who played together within that squad didn't like each other either. And that's part why they didn't perform to the level that they should have. Gareth managed to unite it, and I think gave us a real period, not so much in this tournament, despite reaching the final, but over the last three, where a belief grew and a sense of pride in what the team were trying to do was reignited for the first time in a very, very long time watching England. So for that, I'm extremely thankful for what he did.
Mm. Question for you. I've seen a couple of articles, and I don't know, I'll take them with a real pinch of salt, that there was discord within the team about how Jude Bellingham was getting all of the limelight and all the media was around him. And some people were like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you believe that? Do you think there were some players that were
I
like,
don't
oh,
know.
Jude's
I
getting all
think
the...
that's we need to keep an eye on what's happening with Jude, I think, a little bit.
I think that it was getting made more of. People are looking for the. I think the media or
Maybe.
people are looking for these things. Oh, so and I'm like, just let them be united. Like, why do we have to look for rifts within the squad? Maybe they do exist, and maybe I'm wrong, right? But I didn't see it. I didn't particularly see it. And sure, he's getting made and built out to be a bit of a superstar, and you don't want a situation where one player calls the shots, right? But I didn't see it. And it felt very much like fishing, again, to look for rifts within the team. But I didn't see them. I just saw a squad that had each other's backs. And even when they were getting abuse, it was hunker down and we're in it together, as opposed to different factions from clubs or anything like that.
It's worth saying in terms of Gareth as well. His media handling over the 8 years, not said everything perfectly. He's human, he makes mistakes, but his handling of the media has largely been extremely good, I think, over the 8 years. And over 8 years, I'm sure they tried to dig whatever they could to find something against him, and they never found nothing. And when you look back at previous English managers, I don't think there's another podcast in itself. So I think as you've used the word representation. I think we spoke about that a lot before during the last Euros. Actually, he as a representation as a human being. Forget all of the football. Him as a representation, a leader of a young growing football team is ideal. I've got trust in him as the human, and we forget that. We look at these people as robots all the time. As a human being, he was a really good leader of us. If people want to be angry with the tactics and the football and the style and his selections, and you can debate all them, don't criticize what he did as a man for 8 years for that football team. I think is really important.
Yep, agreed.
What's next? There has been some movement in the betting market since I recorded with Clayton last week. I think we was very much of the certainly Clayton and I think both thought this time last week it would very much be Graham Potter. He's not the favourite with the bookmakers at the time of recording. That is now Eddie Howe. Quite know where that's going to leave Newcastle in the next couple of weeks. I think it's somewhat up in the air, but yeah, there is
Pochettino.
some movement. Well, Pochettino's really interesting as well because what I didn't realize is one of the people who's going to have a serious role in the appointment is a gentleman called John McDermott, who actually, guess where he worked? Tottenham. He worked at Tottenham and actually
Right.
left the club not long after Pochettino left.
Just to be clear, you're talking about the appointment at England or Newcastle?
England.
Right.
But
Well, I meant
yes,
Pochettino will go to
well,
Newcastle.
also
If
at
Eddie Howe comes
Newcastle, Paul Mitchell, who was sporting director at Tottenham
that's why
when
we
Pochettino
talked
was there,
about
is
it, didn't
also
we?
now at Newcastle. So yeah, Pochettino is going to get linked
Swapsies.
with both.
Yeah.
There may well be an approach for Eddie Howe. My thought process, I think, was all what had been very much that I thought he would turn it down, purely because I think if you've got one of the top jobs in this country, if you step away from it, you might not get back to it. And having spoke to Newcastle fans over the last couple of weeks, it's very clear that he's largely loved. People really, really like what he's done there. All the noises from the club is there's no suggestion that they would consider a change, but it might be that they also feel, well, if an Eddie Howe did go, then you maybe now have the opportunity to appoint an experienced world-class manager. We should remember Unai Emery was actually, as far as we're aware, the first choice for the Newcastle job before Eddie Howe. So that might be more the caliber of manager that they might be looking for going forward should there be a change. But my thought process was that Howe would turn it down and begin to think that's softening. Why is that money coming in for Eddie Howe? I think with something as big as this, I'm kind of inclined to think, yeah, no
Cookies no
smoke
more than
without a little
me.
bit of fire, a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Would we like someone like Eddie Howe?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm in
I
agreement
don't
with
think
that.
I don't think I'm particularly bothered who we get, to be honest with you. I do think that if we want to go down the route of improving the tactical ability, the tactical awareness of the team and playing different structures, it will need a manager that doesn't give a crap about what the media think. Like a Mourinho, right? It's my way or the highway. Because everybody has such a strong voice and such a strong opinion around England, and it's so loud, you can't avoid it, that it must bleed through in some way, shape, or form. And it needs somebody that who has a blueprint and will really stick to it regardless of, because that's the style that they want to play. And we have to get behind whatever that blueprint is. So I don't mind Eddie Howe because
As
I think
if
he's
we can,
tactically aware.
as if we can get behind it if we disagree with it
Well, this is
as a
it, right?
nation.
And so this is where if Eddie Howe wants to impress his style of play, which is a lot more intense and there's a lot more running and there's a lot more crash bang wallop, it's almost a Premier League style on an international team. There will be times where he will get criticised for it and he needs to be able to stick with it. I've not seen enough of Eddie Howe to know that he can be feisty enough to say, I'm doing it my way. I don't care what you think, because it's different at a club level where you've got a longer period of time and much more football to show what you do and don't want to do. Whereas if Mourinho was to take the role, for example, I know that he's going to do what he wants to do. And if the media try and poke or he gets criticised in the press, he'll come out fighting, not trying to appease them. So I think, yes, I don't mind Eddie Howe because I think he's tactically aware enough to be able to try something a little bit different. I would hope that he has the backbone, makes it sound a little bit like I don't think he does, but the strength to push back when he gets a lot of criticism around it, if it doesn't work, to stick with his plan and what he wants to do.
I looked at the odds last night and I've just looked again, they've changed again. And Graham Potter's back into favourite again now.
Oh, delete.
What would we think about Potter?
Hmm.
Oh, that's less convinced.
No, I think there's definitely some really good pros. So in terms of a continuation of Gareth culturally way of nurturing the youth players, I think Potter's all over that. I think he'd be very good at nurturing the youth and bringing them through and keeping that togetherness within the squad. So I think culturally, I'm all on board for Potter. I do think he's got it. Tactically, I think is more questionable than Eddie Howe. I think his period at Chelsea and what happened towards the tail end with Brighton and post him at Brighton leaves a few more question marks tactically around Potter potentially. But I do think culturally, no problem. And I do like Graham Potter. Like I was hopeful that he would be one of the candidates that was on the shortlist for the West Ham job, for example. So I can't be critical of him from that point of view because I would have been happy to have him at my club. But I'd want to see a little bit more. Just tactically, I'd probably defer to your understanding of whether or not you think he'd be good at international level more than mine.
I think Potter will drive people insane. I think there might be you might go from one extreme to the other here. I've said this a few times over the last week or so. Careful what you wish for, and I like Graham Potter as well. But I think we might go from something that's quite defensive on what we've watched so far to being something that becomes, what's he doing here? What's he doing? What quite radical. In terms of his tactical knowledge, I think both he and Eddie Howe, I think both are very much underestimated actually in terms of what they can provide tactically and their ability to be flexible. And, I keep reflecting back on Newcastle's performance against Tottenham in April. I think that was an outstanding coaching performance from Eddie Howe tactically that won that game as much as the players on the pitch. And I think we're all largely impressed with Potter at Brighton. And who knows, Chelsea's been a bit of a kind of circus mess over the last couple of years. I'm not suggesting he did need more time because it was going very, very badly, but he may have turned it around. They may be in the same position now if he'd stayed as he went. Those are clearly the two front runners. Lee Carsley is just behind that. So Lee Carsley, for those unaware, is the England under-21 manager. And they play really good football. A lot of people keep referring back to look, Lee Carsley's England under-21 team are really, really good to watch. Much like with Gareth, though, obviously no top-level experience of management. Maurizio Pochettino is on the drift in terms of the betting, but there are links there that I think people can put two and two together.
I think he's going to end up in club football, Pochettino. I don't see him ending up at England.
No, but in terms of the betting now, he's now level with Jurgen Klopp, and I can tell you he's not going to be Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah, he said he wasn't going to manage anywhere for this season.
He said he would not manage anybody this year. He promised Liverpool fans that.
What does year mean? Calendar year? Season?
I think he might have even said season. I'm not sure. He might have said year, but I would be stunned if Jurgen Klopp took the England job. Maybe if it was available again in 2 years, maybe it's a different conversation. I think a lot of us would quite like to have Jurgen Klopp. There obviously will be an element of people who feel like it really should be an English manager, and I think that would always be the preference. But I also think we should be very open-minded at the moment. I think part way ask about the individuals leads on to what Ed said earlier. Like, what do we want to be? What do we want to be next? Because a lot of the criticism over this tournament has been about performance. It's not actually been about results, and yet I said going into the tournament, it's become defined now by results because of what England had achieved in the previous couple of tournaments. It's like right now, it's just about almost like winning and losing. We spoke about success v failure before the tournament, and we said, if England lost to France in a semi-final, is that a success or a failure? And it's kind of like a middle ground. Yeah. It's almost like a par. But once France went on to the other side, I then myself said, if England don't make the final here, it's a failure. Despite what we watched in the group stage, we didn't fail,
and you were right. That was the right attitude.
We did make that final, so I think it always needs a little bit of a caveat where you kind of almost adjust your expectations a little bit. But certainly there was almost a demand of like a minimum semi-final. And until the last few years, you have to remember that between Gareth Southgate taking over and us winning the World Cup, one semi-final in 52 years, we've just had 3. With Gareth.
Do you think if Spain for sure, if I said to you, can you tell me how Spain are going to play? You could tell me, right? They're going to keep the ball. they're going to be neat and tidy. You're not going to get huge, big physicality out of them, but they're going to be technically far superior to everybody else.
I
If I
don't know.
said
Did
to
you
you,
watch that final in 2010? There was a lot of physicality on that particular night against the Dutch.
do you think if you could say the same for let's talk about teams that have been successful in recent international competition? France. Do you think France have an identity and a style of play that they would say is French?
Yeah, boring counter-attacking.
Okay.
On what
Argentina.
we've seen in the last few tournaments.
Argentina. Give it to Messi.
Um, Flair, aggression. You have to be careful. You almost like characterizing people. But I know what you're saying with like Spain, and it's always on the deck that you're not just going to just lump it up to Morata. You're not getting that sort of. You're asking Morata to drop short to link the play rather than go direct to him and then draw other people to him. Yeah, but Spain is also. I would caveat that Suj by saying I think Spain is the most obvious of all. They've
Yeah,
always been
that's
like
why
that.
I'm looking at others like Germany and so on. Can I define it? They vary depending on the manager or the
And I think
era and that kind of thing. But do
yeah, a
England
little bit.
want? Do we want to have an identity? This is how England play.
No, but I think let me use a different example, right? Italian football has a stigma for being defensive, right?
Yep.
Italy were the best team in Euro 2020 slash Euro 2021. They were the best team to watch. I think they were a little bit fortuitous against Spain in the semi-final, ironically, that kind of brand of football. But otherwise, for me, they were the best team in that tournament and deserved to win it by not playing very Italian, as what the perception of what
Okay.
Italian football is.
Yep.
They played good football. Um, and that's what I mean about like, what do we want? What do we want next? Do we now, after these 4 tournaments at Southgate, is it now, do people care? Because I think there's been a change in the psyche of like, this is shit to watch. We've got all these really good players. I want to see us play differently. But would you be sitting there happier now if they'd have played better and lost to Switzerland in the quarterfinal rather than getting to the final? Like, what do people actually want here? Do they want England to play like Spain? Well, actually, when you look back on particularly, I think a great example is the first half against the Dutch and how we dominated that. The idea that England would have almost sort of 2/3 possession at stages against a team like the Dutch, who themselves are considered, total football ideology and stuff,
Yeah. Different
that,
era,
that
but I
we
get
that
it.
we
Yeah.
would outplay them, the direct old English style physical 4-4-2. We would outplay them. Actually, we have moved more towards a more central European style, if you will, in terms of keeping the ball and a little bit more patience. But that's boring people. Possession wasn't a huge problem for England in the tournament, other than the final. Possession was fine. But I think people want obviously more possession to a means. And when I was discussing with Clayton, one of the things I said is it's a little bit different to like club support in the sense you've got all these voices. And the average football fan just will judge their entertainment on a football match by how many shots on goal you had, basically.
Yep.
How entertained am I? How many moments where you could play great football for 80, 90 minutes, but you might just come up against an absolute wall of a brilliant defense and struggle to create chances. Have you played badly? Well, most people would literally just look at that. Well, how many shots did you have? Okay, you shit. So
Yeah, I
what is
agree. We
what does this
default to
country
stats and stuff.
what does this country actually want? Does it want faster football? Does it want winning football?
That's a very rhetorical question. I don't know if I can give you the answer to
No,
that.
that's fine. And I'm
Mm.
not saying that I've necessarily got the answer here. I'm asking as a generalization, what do people want now? Will they be happier if in USA, Canada, Mexico, that these dynamic players play absolutely brilliant football, but get beat in the quarterfinal? Like, are people going to be
No,
happy with that? No, I don't think they are.
no.
It's
I think
still
the
result
default to
orientated.
if you gave a final with rubbish football or a quarter final with great football, people would take the final with rubbish football every time. Not every time, but the majority of people would take the final with rubbish football.
I bet most people can't remember those shitty group games now. And there's a reason why you'd forget them because they were shitty. But it's gone. It's gone from the memory. Said that, particularly under
Yep.
this 2014 format, group stages is basically irrelevant. And World Cup will feel similar, by the way, with 32 teams going through and 8 out of 12 third best teams making it to the knockout stage. That's probably going to feel very similar. Had you seen this advert from
No, I
England?
hadn't. Just I think what England need and what England need to be moving forward is just a little bit more humble, James. I need a lot more humility out of the English fan base and the media, not the team necessarily. Like, I don't buy into a lot of statements and phrases are made about the team that I think are not based on any sort of foundation. Let me give you a few examples, right? Would be that this team could play a different style of football, like Spain, for example. Can they? Well, what's to say that they can? They know you have no evidence that they can. Like, we've got one or two players that play in certain clubs that they do, but never as a collective. That's with other players around them. Like, it's an assumption that they should. We've set an assumption that they should and could be able to play at that level, but it's not evidenced by the national team ever, right? On the day of the final, the weight of money was with who, James?
Must have been with Spain.
The odds on England was getting shorter as we got closer to the final.
Patriotism.
Correct, right? But what changed from the morning to the end of the day?
It was going to be the greatest day of people's lives. That's what changed.
This is
and
it.
People wanted to win money along with the moment.
Yeah, I think when I say a little bit of humility, I'm like, as we get closer, we just get more and more. We're going to win it, and it's coming home, and we're going to do great. And the players that we have are the best in the world, and so on and so on. I think we need to snap out of it a little bit and be much more realistic.
That's interesting. There's two sides to that. One, again, it's something I've really discussed with Clayton on our Patreon pods. We've been covering England over the tournament. Is I think there's a perception of English arrogance, absolutely, that is outside of England that we don't think we are. And again, this is
100%. I'm from inside England.
A generalization.
And 100% we are. And also, yet, now you can say to me, get out of the country then if you think we're all arrogant. Well, I did. But
I never spoke to one person at any point during the tournament whose football opinion that I'd valued said to me, I really think we're going to win it. You know, move away from the it's coming home stuff, to just actually sit down to me and tell me why you think England are going to win this tournament. I never heard it. Never heard it.
But what about the radio and the TV and what have you? Everybody that they
choose to listen to shit like that, mate.
No. But BBC and everybody, and I get you. They're not going to go and find people that they want to interview on the streets and whatever. They're going to turn around and say, yeah, I don't think England are going to win. I think we have to be a little bit more sensible. I think some of the interviews, like we come back to Jude, that he did before the Spain was, look, these are a great team. It's going to be very difficult. I'll play with some of these. Just some humility of actually, do you know what? Winning is a bonus. The closer we get, the more we hype ourselves up and we big up these players. I believe we big up the players too much.
You've fallen into a trap there. You know that. What do media need to do?
Sell advertising, James.
Need to sell. They have to necessarily believe the words that they say.
I get it, but it all feeds into the same pot of almost it's hysteria or hyperbole as just as maybe a mild, and arrogance at the other end, right? And the problem is that arrogance, when it's coupled with a lack of football understanding, and what you said there about the person who's footballing opinion matters, right? It's where that whole hype of we're going to do it without an understanding of actually what's going on the pitch with 11 against 11 creates that arrogance mindset.
So we could have released the podcast.
And I definitely think people outside of England, if you ask them to describe English football fans or English football media or English football clubs, more often than not would use the word arrogant. And I think it would do us no harm to knock ourselves down a peg or two.
I can't change the media.
No, we can't.
I'll tell you why as well. We could have released the podcast and it could have been titled Why England Will Win the Euros. Okay. Now, within that, we might not have even said that. But if I'd done that, it would have got a load more views on YouTube than the stuff we regularly put out. Do you realise that?
I agree. If England,
so I'm going to do that next time, more views.
If throughout the entire tournament, the messaging from the media and everybody and the fans was positive towards the squad. Okay, you didn't play well, but we believe in you. You can do it. all right, Gareth, it wasn't right tactically, but come on, like do your best or whatever, as opposed to what are you doing? You don't know what you're doing. You're all playing crap and whatever. Do England have a better chance or a worse chance of winning the tournament?
Listen,
If we're all pushing in the same direction, does it give us a better chance
of
or a
course, they
worse
have a better
chance?
chance. But
Well,
then you could
this is
also
it.
use one of the real arguments, particularly before the Slovakia game, was like there was obviously a lot of criticism at that point. Was well, this might fuel the fire, and then the system changed. That didn't work, and then the system changed against Switzerland. It was like okay, people can get on board, right? He's realised he's got to change the system and adapt because clearly what we're doing is not working, and then that gives people like a different little false hope. And okay, it was better against Switzerland, but quite frankly, it couldn't have got much worse because the performances weren't good, Suj. It's also okay to. I loved Gareth what he did, and it's also okay to go. Yeah, actually, that was largely crap. We never played like a team that got to the final. We discussed yesterday on our Q&A. It was like if England won the tournament, Cole Walker got into the team of the tournament, which is laughable. But even if we'd have won the final, what England players would you put in team of the tournament?
Well, yeah.
That
I just,
didn't play great. It's okay to say
yeah,
that.
yeah. And listen, my desire for humility across the board from fans and clubs and media and everybody is as likely as everybody's desire to get Harry Kane dropped from the squad of the team during the tournament. Wasn't going to happen, so I may as well, like, you know, it's going to fall on deaf ears unless we go another 60 years winning nothing. Tell me about this JD because job description because maybe I'll apply.
Thought you was going to ask me to talk about Jermaine Defoe now, who
No,
definitely is a little
no,
bit too
no.
old
Tell
to
me
play.
about this job description and let's
Well,
see if I can apply.
here's the good news, and I can say this with near certainty. The England manager will not be getting appointed before we've released this podcast. And that's because the closing date for the England job, and this is posted on the FA's careers website, this is legit for the England national men's team job. Closing date is August the 2nd. Again, well, I don't know if they're
End of next week. End of next week, peeps.
next Friday. So shouldn't be an appointment before then, guys. The location will be to work at the National Football Centre, obviously at St George's Park. I'm going to read this to you. We are currently overseeing a highly targeted process to appoint the next head coach of the England men's senior team. Our succession planning process has already identified a number of candidates. In addition to this, we are committed to open recruitment processes in the football industry and are interested in hearing from individuals who meet the following criteria. So, the role, 3 key points: to lead and develop the England senior men's team to win a major tournament and be consistently ranked as one of the top teams in the world. Provide inspiring leadership to a world-class multidisciplinary technical team based at St George's Park and develop and maintain strong relationships with clubs who employ English qualified players. Remit here: develop, collaborate, win.
Yep.
Happy with that?
I think it's jargon, James.
So
Yeah,
far,
of course I'm happy with that, but I just think it's jargon, James. I think it's there.
So far, I can apply.
Yeah.
Problem is, I don't hold a UEFA Pro license, so that rules me out. So the successful
And
candidate.
those are not cheap, by the way.
Yes, I know. My dad keeps saying that to me. Why don't you do coaching? I'm like, Dad. And he's like, I'll pay for it. I'm like, Dad, I don't think you understand.
It's about it's years. It's not months. It's like 4 or 5 years and maybe 10 grand or something. I don't know what the total is. And it's going to be in the thousands, though. Is it more? Yeah. And who needs that?
Well, whoever's going to manage the English football team
and
needs
listen, your Twitter profile, your Twitter historical, however many thousand tweets will disqualify you. I'm sure there's stuff in there that definitely disqualifies you from.
God, Nico's corner would kill me.
Exactly.
The successful candidate will hold a UEFA Pro license, will have significant experience of English football, with a strong track record delivering results in the Premier League and or leading international competitions. What that says to me is that any candidate who has not either managed at international football or in the Premier League would be discounted here.
Yep.
So got to have managed at international level or within the Premier League. Now, Lee Carsley would still fall under the international remit there.
Yeah, it's come through the system.
The successful candidate will be an exceptional leader who understands and will enjoy the international football environment. There's no guarantee that a club manager who wants the day-to-day stuff would enjoy the international football environment. You know, things like the collaborating with clubs. The successful candidate will be experienced in successfully identifying, managing, developing English qualified players, will be highly resilient, God, you've got to be, and comfortable in a very high profile role with intense public scrutiny, obviously. Will have a track record of creating a high performing positive team culture and environment. That's Mourinho ruled out for you, boss. And will have strong personal values and integrity and understand and embrace the role that the England men's senior team head coach has inspiring the nation. Having heard all that, who do you think's the right candidate?
Oh, I don't know if I'm qualified to throw a hat in the
I'll
ring.
tell you the answer. It's Gareth Southgate. No, being serious. When I read that, it just felt like I was reading all the things that Gareth Southgate are good at. That's what I
and of
thought.
course, because they want continuity.
Correct. And why wouldn't they when actually the English football team go back to when Gareth took over and the previous manager doing dodgy dealings in a bar and Iceland's before with the manager before that and where it's gone over the last 8 years, why would they want to completely rip it up? The England football team, if we just step away and remove ourselves, has been on an upward trajectory. The quality of players we are producing and getting on into our team is on an upward trajectory. It's not even just the men's team, is it? Think about the quality of the under 21s, the under 19s, the trophies they begin to put in away, and even the Lionesses as well. Right? So, as a whole, for the FA, English football actually is probably on its biggest upward trajectory it's ever been on. Why would you massively change away from that? But yet,
Agreed.
people did want change here. But the reality is, when you read what the criteria is, Gareth Southgate could have written it. It's almost like they've gone to it. It feels like they've almost gone to him and said, "What do you think this job needs, Gareth?" And he's gone, "Yeah, that's it. This is what's worked." And I think it's really important to say that all the insiders are saying that absolutely the FA are gutted that Gareth Southgate has stepped down.
Agreed.
They did not want change. The FA don't want a hassle. They had a man in there who they could trust, wasn't going to give the FA negative headlines and was improving the results and the culture of English football. Whatever they appoint next is not guaranteed as the whole package from the FA's perspective to do as well. In fact, it is more likely that what comes next will not do as well as Gareth.
We will be back in about 2 weeks. And we never know, James. We might have a manager appointed. So as and when we get past correspondent week and get closer and closer, we'll be recording again once England have a new manager, no doubt.
Christ, it'll have to be after game week 1.
We think it is.
I've got no room in the schedule.
No. I mean, there's no rush on it, but there's no doubt. And if not, we'll do it on Patreon, James. And if people want to sign up to be a patron, they can do that from next week.
Yes,
Thursday,
from the 30th.
The 1st of August. Patreon.com/Planet FPL. Cheeky plug for next week.
Well sold. I'll close on this. The values that the FA want are to aim high, achieve together, and embrace difference. And I think that's what Gareth did. And it's still okay at the same time to sit here and go, he did the right thing. Because the FA weren't going to sack him. He did the right thing, knowing that it was right now for him to hand it over to someone else. And I think that was the right decision.
Awesome. James, what do you have for the rest of the week for the listeners before we wrap this show?
Tomorrow, it's the Clayton and James show. I don't know what we'll be talking about, but it'll be football related topics. I did note this morning that everyone's gunning for Gianni Infantino this morning. So we may well be covering that and a selection of other topics. We'll also be looking at some of the newest players to the Premier League on Thursday that you're perhaps unfamiliar with. And my Ask James stream will be at the later time than usual, 6 p.m. on Friday evening.
Lovely, jubbly. Listeners, wherever you're listening to the podcast, make sure you are following, liking, subscribing, notification bells, whatever else your platform of choice allows you to do. If you disagree with any of our comments, YouTube is the place to do it. Jump on and let us know whether you think England are the greatest team since sliced bread.
if you can be nice.
Emma. Yeah. Keep it, civil. Stay safe though. Look after yourselves, and see you in a couple of weeks. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Be nice to each other. Cue music, please. Match up.